Hello everybody and good evening. Welcome to our next live stream here at the Grist Mill and Gardens. My name's Chris. I am the general manager here at the Grist Mill, and I'm really happy to have you here with me tonight. I figured the perfect drink for this evening would be a nice chamomile tea, so I'll be sipping on that while we're chatting tonight. We were really heartened to see so many people interested in tonight's live stream, and I hope that most of the people who RSVP'd showed up. So anyways, welcome. For those of you that don't know anything about me or this place, the Grist Mill is a provincial heritage site, one of 14 around the province of BC. You might be familiar with our big brothers, Barkerville and Fort Steele. We're one of the medium-sized ones, built around a almost 150-year-old water wheel-powered flour mill, as well as a couple of other old buildings and some beautiful gardens. When the gardens were first established back in the mid-80s, there was a real strong attempt to try and make these gardens not just pretty, but also educational. And so a lot of work went into looking at old settler diaries, looking at other old sources, trying to figure out what people were growing 150 years ago. And that's where a lot of our gardens came from. Now, one of the gardens in particular went through many different iterations over the years. And the idea of this original garden, which was going to be a series of garden beds, was meant to represent different eras here in the Similkameen Valley. And because of the herb, it was referred to as a walk through time, T-H-Y-M-E. Now, the linear walk through time in the end was only ever a plan, and instead a circle garden was created to offer something similar. Now, in the last couple of years, we've been renovating our gardens and made a bunch of big changes, and one of them is to that original circle garden. Instead of each bed representing a different era, the way that it originally did, we created a new garden to do that job, and instead our garden now represents all of the gardeners and people that have done gardening on this site and their personal interests, because each of them had an interest. So next week you might notice our live stream is all about dyeing plants. Well, that's because one of the people that work here was incredibly interested in dyeing plants and actually collected quite a few, and so we have a garden bed dedicated to that. We have another garden bed dedicated just to culinary herbs. There have been a number of excellent cooks here over the years. One is dedicated to medicinal plants, for example. And the one that we're talking about today is all about edible flowers. So ever since I got here 12 years ago, I moved up from Vancouver to run this place here in Caramias, BC. I've been interested in the idea of edible flowers. I love the idea that you can take something from the garden that's absolutely beautiful and delicate and use it in food in so many different ways. And that's exactly what we tried to do. Now, it seems there's a little problem with my microphone. I don't know if any of you have noticed that yet, but it seems to be clipping out just a little bit. If you have any problems, please feel free to mention it in the chat. And if any of you have just joined us, please let me know where you're visiting us from today in the chat on the live stream. Now, edible flowers are a huge topic, because honestly, one way of looking at it is that every flower is edible, at least once. Unfortunately, a lot of flowers are poisonous or have really bad flavors or don't grow well where you are. And so there's a lot of considerations that go into picking varieties that are actually going to be what you're interested in. You got to think a little bit about your uses. How might you want to use these things? What space does your garden or the containers on your patio actually have to try and figure out what sort of things you could choose to grow? You obviously probably aren't going to do what we do, which is establish a huge garden bed that's primarily just for edible flowers. We're doing that because we do that for education. You might want plants that are edible but also great for the pollinators, or contribute in other ways to your garden. Maybe you'll be tucking the edible flowers in with other things that you're growing. Another thing to keep in mind is, how do you want to grow these plants? Many of the edible flowers we're talking about today can be easily grown from seed, but not all of them. Some of them, it's easier to get them from nurseries. The downside of nurseries, of course, is you don't know what they've been fed, what they've been sprayed with, so you need to be very, very careful. You need to be aware of these things, because if you're going to eat it, you want to know what kind of things it was exposed to. Because some chemicals used in large-scale production in greenhouses aren't great for you. Some of them will wash off over time. But you still want to be aware of these kinds of things. You also want, I don't even know what I was going to say. Anyways, I think really what we should do is we should switch over to our other screen specifically so that I can start to show you some of the different kinds of things you could choose to grow. Now, it's really, really important when we have this part of the conversation is, although I do grow edible flowers, and although I do know what I'm talking about, you still shouldn't trust me. It's easy to make mistakes. It's easy to remember the wrong thing. You need to do your own research, check a few different sources to make sure that the flower or the plant that you think you have is what you have and actually something that is edible. There are some things out on the internet that suggest that plants that are actually kind of poisonous or have negative side effects like stomach upset still call them edible even though they might not be. A great example of that would be sweet peas. Sweet peas smell incredible, but they're not edible. Regular peas, however, their flowers are edible. So that's just one example. Anyways, let's start to go through our little slideshow of different kinds of flowers here. While we do this, I'm actually going to get back to my other screen. I am lucky enough to have two screens here with me today. Let me show you the view from another angle. So this is me right now, and I have my preview screen with my big presentation on it. And then I've got my laptop where I can see what's being sent out to you guys and what I've got lined up next and all of those things. It's actually kind of cool. I've also got my lights so that, I look better from the front. I look really slouchy from the side. My goodness, I got to work on my posture. Okay, let's get back to our presentation. Okay. So we're going to run through a bunch of different kinds of flowers you may be interested in growing in your garden and a few of their uses, okay? So first and foremost, this has two names. This is sometimes called cornflower, also called bachelor's buttons. Now, don't ever make the mistake if you're at a wedding and you're doing corsages, don't ever put a bachelor's button in. That's not exactly good for whoever it is wearing it. Anyways, bachelor's buttons are edible. And those cute, what look like blue flowers are actually compound flowers. There are a whole bunch of little flowers all around it. And you would pick those off and you could put those in a salad, other places. They don't really have much flavor. They're just to add a nice pop of color. Next, this is sometimes referred to as bergamot. It's not the same thing that you would find in an Earl Grey tea, which is actually a kind of citrus. Bergamot, also called bee balm, though, does have a similar aroma. These petals also can be picked off and have a kind of herby, slightly medicinal taste, but you could pick those off and put those in a salad or as a light garnish to something as well. Now, one of the advantages of bee balm is that pollinators also absolutely love them. So right away, they're serving a dual purpose in your garden. There's another more close-up view of a bee balm, sometimes called wild bergamot. That's what they look like. Next, we have one of the surprises. This is a begonia. Both kinds of begonia, both the tuberous and the waxy begonias, are edible. And I find that these, what we've got on the screen right now, are actually just some of the tastiest. So these little begonias, the petals are juicy and thick, and when you bite into them, you get this incredible burst of lemon. They are really, really fantastic. So if you put them in a lemonade, for example, they'd be a really nice garnish. When you bit into it, it would just add to the lemoniness of it all. Not all begonias have that strong a flavor, but this particular kind with the very simple flowers, not the double flowers, not the fancy ones, but these, which come in a range of colors, all have just that wonderful lemony kick. Now these guys, absolutely one of my favorites. This is a plant called borage, and borage mostly is an herb used in some French cooking. So the leaves can be used. But these flowers, these little tiny flowers, which we have a close-up of right here, are beautiful. And what's fascinating about them is they taste like cucumbers. So if you take one of those and you can get over the fact that it's a little fuzzy, it's got a little hair in it, it's not irritating, but it's a little weird, and you bite into it, and all of a sudden you have this burst of cucumber flavor. Here's another picture of them, as well as a lot of buds that haven't opened yet. One of the great things about borage is that if you plant it in the first season, it will self-seed. It will drop a lot of seeds and just keep growing. It isn't too weedy, but it will keep coming back. It's one of those easy to do in your garden. You just want to make sure you're thinning it every so often so it doesn't take over. One of my favorite things to do with borage, though, is to freeze it in ice cubes. I find that freezing the borage flowers in ice cubes, remember they're cucumbery, that is absolutely incredible in a gin and tonic, in the right gin and tonic. It looks pretty, it's got the right flavor so that when the ice melts, if you happen to eat any of the flowers, you're going to enjoy it. It complements everything really, really nicely. So I absolutely love borage for that. Now these are calendula. Calendula has a ton of uses outside of eating, of course. You'll see a lot of salves made with it and its healing properties. Well, we frequently pick off the petals of these flowers. They're kind of like daisies. We pick off all the petals and we can put them on top of a salad to add a nice pop of color. They generally are in the orange to yellow color range, calendula, so that's what you're going to get. It does have, the kind of herby flavor, a stronger aroma, so you don't want to use too many. It would be off-putting to have it be that kind of herby, but for a little pop of color, they're just absolutely fantastic. There's another picture of some more calendula right there. And, a few on just about anything can make a really, really fancy garnish. Some people actually say it kind of reminds them of saffron and kind of has a flavor similar to saffron, just a little bit. So that hopefully gets you thinking about some of the ways you could use it. Now, what I love about this picture is that in the background, you've got a borage flower on the other thing. It just happened that way. This is a picture I picked for the calendula, but I noticed that the borage is there too. Next, we have chamomile. Now we have to be careful with chamomile because some kinds, particularly something called scented chamomile, can be really weedy. But this is Roman chamomile. This is the classic. When you're having a chamomile tea, like the one that I have right here, that is what's in it. And those cute, delicate little tiny flowers, whether fresh or dried, just add a lovely aroma and a beautiful look. Again, they're quite pungent. You know the smell of chamomile, probably. You probably wouldn't want to have too much of that on anything unless you were going to play with that aroma. But it's a beautiful thing. Now, there's something else that's also called chamomile, but I prefer to call it by its other name, which is pineapple weed. Now, pineapple weed is a weed. It grows in disturbed areas. You will see it in the gravel at the side of the road. You'll find it in our parking lot. It has a very, very strong distinct smell. If you've ever smelled it before, you know what it is. It is sometimes referred to as wild chamomile because you can use it in a lot of the same ways. So if you can use the flowers of chamomile, you can also use these flowers of wild chamomile. They are very pungent. They actually are better for making tea than using as edible flowers, but it is a very, very neat plant and one that I'm fond of. The downside is because it grows in disturbed areas, you have to be extra careful, right? You wouldn't want to pick it out of a parking lot where gasoline or washer fluid or somebody's coffee or oil or whatever was spilt on it. You want to be careful about that. But if you can find a place that doesn't have any of those things, you could harvest some of that for yourself. Chives. If you've ever grown green onions or chives, you probably have seen them get to the place where they flower. And at that point, the stalk underneath it's pretty woody, but you can pick those petals off and do some wonderful things with them because they have an onion flavor. A couple of those as a garnish on a little bite, just perfect. Get a bunch of those and put them in a jar with vinegar, and you'll end up with a beautiful chive vinegar with a nice pink color. The vinegar actually leaches the color and the flavor out of them. Best thing about having chives growing in your garden, whether regular chives or garlic chives, is that they're the gift that keeps on giving. Once they've established, as long as you don't mow them down too hard, they're going to keep coming back for you. You're going to keep getting more. You'll be able to run out to the garden a dozen or more times a year and just trim some off for whatever it is you happen to be doing. And chives always come in handy. Here's a great example of a way of using those chive flowers, right? We've taken them off of the flower and sprinkled them onto our little bites there. And I love the fact that they're using green onion as well, just to add that extra bit of flavor of onioniness. I like that picture a lot. In fact, I'm just going to leave it up there for a second while on my other screen I go here and check on our live stream. Excellent. Hello, everybody that's currently on the live stream. If I haven't had a chance to say hello to you yet, you got here a little late. Hello. It's so cool the places we've got people from. Penticton, Osoyoos, Karamias, Vancouver Island, Hawaii, Aloha, Abbotsford, other places. Welcome to our live stream. Now that we've acknowledged everybody, let's get back to our presentation here. So, we've talked about the chive flowers. Now, this family of flowers is the best. It is absolutely the prettiest. It's got a huge range in colors and things you can do with them. That's the pansy, viola, violet family of flowers. These beautiful pansies right here come in different colors. They come in different sizes. From the little one in the middle, the Johnny Jump Up, right up to big pansies. They don't have a ton of flavor. Violets themselves, which we'll get to in a minute, do have a good, strong, sweet aroma. But otherwise, these are more pretty than they are, usable in other ways. Sprinkle them on salads, things like that. It'll make everything look very sophisticated. So you can see they really do come in a whole range of colors, and they're absolutely charming. You can buy the seeds. You can buy them, like I said, from nurseries. Just be careful that if you're getting nursery ones, that it's a thoughtful nursery that isn't spraying really harsh chemicals or things, because eventually you're going to eat these, right? Okay. Some more beautiful colors of violas and pansies. Now here's a neat thing that you can do with them. You can candy them. You can sugar them. It dries them out. It coats them in sugar. And especially with something like a violet that has that strong violet aroma, that wonderfully sweet aroma. These are real little treasures and can be used in all sorts of ways in your cooking. Come highly recommended. Now, if you want to know how to do that, there's lots of places on the website. Just look up sugared violets and you will find lots of sources. Next, we've got lilacs. Lilacs are one of those spring treasures. I love lilac season here. One of the reasons I love lilac season is because so many of the early settlers in this part of the Similkameen Valley established lilac early because it would grow into these big, thick hedges that would help cut the local wind. And so every spring when lilac starts blooming, this whole valley fills with the smell. It is absolutely intoxicating. And best of all, it's almost at the time, just a couple of days before, when the apple blossoms start. And then they also provide their own aroma and their own just enchanting beauty. Now, apple blossoms, by the way, are edible as well. Lilacs, as well, edible. You would pick the petals off, those individual little flowers in the clusters, you would pick those off. And you can do lots and lots of different things with them. Next, we've got nasturtiums. Nasturtiums, I think, are the king of edible flowers. One great thing about nasturtiums is you can grow them anywhere. They will grow happily in a container. They will happily take up a small amount of space, especially if you've got one that's a trailing kind that wants to like vine out, because you can train that vine onto things and it can take up a very, very small footprint because it goes up. But you get these gorgeous big flowers that are a couple of inches across. And when you pick one off and you eat it, it's sharp, it's spicy, it's got that radishy, horseradish, hits you in the nose a little bit like wasabi kind of flavor. And although it's hard to see in these pictures, in the very, very back, no, doesn't seem you can see my cursor. But in the very, very back of these flowers, there's a long part that draws back. And that part that draws back is full of the nectar. So when I let kids try them, I don't have them eat the flower, I just have them eat the back part, because then they get more of the sweet and less of the spicy. But these stunning flowers look incredible on a salad, add a ton of zip and joy, and come in so many different colors as well. Now earlier on, I mentioned peas. And I mentioned that sweet peas smell and look beautiful, but they are not edible. But regular peas are. Whether you're talking about snap peas, shelling peas, their flowers are absolutely edible. They are delicate. They don't tend to last very long once you pick them. And that's something you're going to find with a lot of different edible flowers, is some of them are really robust and some of them are not. These are pretty delicate, so you want to work with them pretty quickly. But if you have an extra flush of them in the spring, they do taste pea-like, and you can use those in your salad. Now, there are actually some really, really cool kinds of edible peas called tendril peas. And those tendrils that the pea uses to hold on and climb up, tendril peas have actually been bred to produce a ton of those tendrils. And those tendrils, you can actually trim off the plant and use them as a garnish as well. So it's not a flower, it's a different part of the plant, but gives you that same, add something unusual to your salad. It's a cool texture, all these little tendrils all mixed in your salad. My favorite, I think, of all the flowers, for me, the king is the peony. I love the way they can only burst open with ants helping them. Like, you're always going to find ants on a peony, on the peony buds. You're going to see them working away. I don't know what they do exactly. I'm not an expert in that. I'm sure they stimulate it or something like that. But eventually these gorgeous flowers just burst open. And the smell of a peony is intoxicating. And they're soft and they're delicate. One person, I can't get it out of my mind that one person once referred to a garden bed full of peonies as an explosion in an underwear drawer. That it was frilly and delicate and pink and just everywhere. Well, one of the really cool things about peonies is the petals actually have a really interesting flavor. It's sort of like strawberry or peach or somewhere in there. In addition to that wonderful aroma, they make a great jelly, right? You take the petals off the plant, you put them in water, you boil it just enough to get that essence out, and you can make an incredible jelly. And different colors of peonies, whether you're talking about white or pink or red, are all going to make different colors of jelly. Now, the last time I had a chance to make any real amount of peony jelly was back during COVID, because we were closed to the public in June, and so the gardener said I could take them all and make jelly. I haven't been allowed to do that since, but someday I would love to get into that again. But peony petals are absolutely fantastic. There, in fact, is a couple of samples of peony jelly. And yeah, you can see the range of colors you can get, just depending on which flowers you use. Dianthus, also called Sweet William, is our next plant. It also is edible. They're, lovely in the way that they're frilly. There are many different subspecies within the Dianthus family. Most of them are edible. Do your research. But Sweet Williams, absolutely, in their whites and pinks and reds and related colors, make for a very, very nice presentation. Oh, excuse me, I need to take a sip here just for 1 second. While we're doing that, are any of you out there watching today, are any of you actually growing flowers right now? Well, not right now, but in the summertime in your garden, do you have flowers that you actually use as edible flowers? If so, I would love to hear about it in the chat. All right, let's get back to our presentation. Now these are primrose. Primrose flowers are edible as well. Roses are amazing. Roses can be used for so many different things. Individual rose petals, of course, are beautiful decoration. But also, well, here's the thing about roses. The thing about roses is they're not all the same. Some are quite delicate, the petals are soft. Others, they're quite leathery. Get to know your rose before you commit yourself. I mean, a rose is a serious commitment. It requires a lot of long-term love. If you are specifically looking at a rose plant because you want to have more edible flowers, make sure that it's a more delicate kind of rose, that the flower itself isn't going to have heavy, thick, leathery petals, that they're going to be something a little more delicate. That said, one of my favorite things to make in the spring is rose petal jam. You can, if you pick enough roses, if you have access to like a good big bush rose, you pick those petals, you cook them down with lots of sugar and pectin and lemon juice, and you can make an absolutely incredible rose petal jam. And there it is right there. That is a beautiful picture. Stock photo, but it's okay, of rose petal jam. Even the weedy plants in our yards, like dandelions, are perfectly edible. The thing about a dandelion is you really just want to eat the petals, and you want to get it when it's still new. Ideally, you avoid a place where the neighborhood dog or cat is peeing, but you're going to do that for all of your plants, I hope, anyways. But just that little jolly color, those little yellow petals, are fantastic. Snapdragons as well. Now this is, again, something that you want to take off of the plant. You just want the petals. But those gorgeous little chomping flowers, I loved squeezing their cheeks when I was young to make them open and close. They're a beautiful addition to something like a salad. The thing you want to keep in mind is you probably don't want to have too many of them. I've also made dandelion wine. It is still sitting in my cupboard. It's been there 5 years. I have no idea how it is. The first batch, we made 4 bottles. The first bottle, we didn't like very much, so we hoped it would be better with aging. Maybe I should go back to it. Next, squash or zucchini blossoms. That family of plants has these gorgeous blossoms, and you can use the petals as is, but they also make a pretty amazing container. So you'll see it on some menus where the flower has been stuffed full of something, often like a creamy cheese mixture, and then they're battered and deep fried, and you end up with these gorgeous fritters that are often absolutely delicious. Now, it takes obviously a lot of flowers to make something satisfying, so you got to decide, do you want the squash or do you want the flowers? But that's a wonderful use, a wonderful edible flower. Now, of course, sunflowers as well, an excellent petal. They're generally very large. They need to be often cut into strips to be manageable unless you have a very small sunflower variety. We love using sunflower petals in our salads and in our things like that. They make a beautiful garnish. You can also eat sunflower blossoms before they open. There's ways to cook it in a pan to get kind of a cool, like nutty, artichoke-y kind of experience from sunflowers. So if you're curious about that, go look up recipes. How to eat sunflower buds. Now those are some of the popular garden flowers. There are also other flowers like fruit blossoms. Most of them are completely edible. Some of them have lovely aroma. You could definitely pick apple blossoms in the springtime and use those. Another source of edible flowers in a garden are herbs. If an herb is edible, there's a 99% chance that its flower is edible too. So for example, if your basil bolts and you end up with basil flowers, that's okay. Those flowers can be eaten and you can use those for something. Maybe you make a pesto with the leaves and you garnish with the flower. Be very elegant. Cilantro. If you ever grow cilantro, coriander, before it goes to seed, you get these flowers. And those flowers are also edible. They're very tiny, they're very delicate, but they might be exactly what you need. Dill flowers also are edible. The long stems that connect it to the center are kind of tough, so you'd want to trim them, and it's a fair amount of work. They're going to have a very strong dill kind of flavor, but they're fun for their shape and their texture. They're like little fireworks explosions that you could use. Tons of different plants in the mint family, whether you're talking about something like anise hyssop, like this picture, or mints. The flowers themselves are absolutely edible. They're tiny, 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 tiny. I mean, the inflorescence, the collection of flowers on the plant is pretty large, but the individual flowers are tiny. They are going to have minty, sometimes bitter flavors. You might not want to use too much of it, but a little bit going to go a long way. There you go. There's another mint plant. Something to keep in mind about mint, if you've never grown mint before, is that it also tends to get pretty weedy, tends to spread. So have a plan in place before you plant mint. Give it some natural boundaries, otherwise it's going to run away on you. Not that the bees are going to mind. Pollinators love it. Sage also has beautiful flowers. It can also be entirely eaten. So hopefully this little guided tour through some of the different plants you could choose to grow is giving you some inspiration now. Give you a chance to really think about some of the kinds of things you might want to grow in your garden. Now, every place is different. Vancouver Island has very different growing conditions than Karameas does. Hawaii, I know you're just away on vacation. How cool that you're joining us on your vacation. Is going to be growing different things again. So you want to consult seed catalogs if you have access to them, the internet, learn more about what it is that you need to grow where you grow. Most of the things that I mentioned are going to grow well in most places, at least in most places we're talking about, whether we're talking Vancouver Island or the interior. Some things like basil don't do well outside here because it gets so hot they bolt quickly. Lettuces, same thing. But do your research, pick some varieties, add them to your garden, and I think you will be very, very pleasantly surprised as you start to explore the amazing world of edible flowers. Now, I'm not actually done yet. There's a few more things that I want to show you because I want to give you some more ideas on more creative uses for your edible flowers. Taking those edible flowers and putting them into shortbread cookies, making absolutely stunning cookies. I mean, look at those. Isn't that just amazing? You can see there the pansies. You can see the chamomile, all the other flowers. Now, you do have to be careful. Like that one in the top left corner looks like a looks almost like a whole calendula. The center of the calendula isn't going to taste very good. That looks pretty. I'm not sure how delicious it's going to be. Some of the really big flowers also tend to have a, kind of a chewiness to them. You bite into the cookie and then you take half the flower off. You want to be mindful of that. But that is really, really pretty. Flowers can also be used in drinks. Here's some lemonades where the flower has actually been boiled in the water and then cooled back down. And you can make some really, really delicious lemonades. We do a lilac lemonade here, a lavender lemonade sometimes. Mint flowers in a lemonade would be really nice, kind of give you a mojito almost kind of flavor. That would be really fun too. But really, when you get down to it, they just create this wonderful pop of interest in whatever you're doing. Here you've got some avocado toast, and that already seems pretty fancy to me as a Gen Xer. I don't know how I'd afford it, but look at those beautiful violets and chamomile flowers sitting on there as well with a little broadleaf parsley. Now this one was really, really neat. This was something that I found. I found the picture first. I need to go off in search of the recipe. Basically, they have taken and made a clear jelly. I bet it's delicious. Probably with gelatin, sugar, a few other things. And then they've actually put the flowers right into it. There's strawberries in there as well on a base of, it could even be cream cheese. What a beautiful, beautiful presentation. What a neat dessert that would be to eat. Liquor. This right here is violet liqueur. Grabbed a big handful of violets from the lawn in the early spring. It's one of the first things that blooms here in the spring out of the garden. Just pick handfuls and handfuls and handfuls, soak it in vodka, strain it off. You get a beautiful colored liqueur. It has that aroma of sweet violet. Can't be beat. Just absolutely incredible. Of course, you take those flowers and you dry them, and you can make a lot of different teas. Chamomile's an obvious one. Rose petals can be used in a tea. Lots of the others. Bergamot, bee balm. I mean, it's got that bergamot flavor. It'd be excellent in a tea as well. Lots of ways of using them. Now, I'm going to end this part of this presentation on this incredible picture. Don't be inspired by this picture. Be vaguely horrified about this picture, because the more you look at it, the weirder it gets. I found this. I was mesmerized by it at the beginning. I was like, oh, that's a stunning picture. And then I realized it's AI, because a lot of the things don't have the right shapes. For example, in the bottom left corner, there is a strawberry, and right below it is a dried piece of citrus fruit, except it's got pomegranate seeds, and the shape of it's kind of like a pomegranate cut in half. That's just one. There's lots and lots of weird little details when you start to look at that picture, but it's still pretty amazing, showing flowers being used, and including some I couldn't possibly hope to identify, but being used in various fancy drinks. All right. So far we've covered a little bit about some of the flowers you could choose to grow, some of the ways that you might use them, some things to think about, like what's going to grow well where you are, what other purposes might those plants serve, how are you going to keep them from being pesticide free if you're going to use them for eating, how do you make sure that you're putting them in safe places, or that they come from safe sources, because nursery plants, although easy and sometimes necessary, we definitely use nursery plants in our own gardens, including for the flowers that we eat. I like getting my nasturtiums already started by somebody else so that they are well established by the time the public comes. But you do need to be mindful of how they're being treated beforehand, how they're being treated when you are not out in your garden, and how you're treating them when you bring them inside. Now, let's talk about what happens next. So you're growing all of these flowers. You're enjoying them just for the sake of them being beautiful in your garden. And you decide, hey, I want to go and pick some of these. I'm going to use some right now. I'm going to use some later. Okay. Now, the first thing to keep in mind is that when you are picking, if you are picking something that you want to have a strong taste, like if you're picking herb flowers, pick them first thing in the morning, in the cool of the morning, if you want them to have the strongest aromas. It's the same with herbs generally. You pick them in the morning, they're going to have a stronger flavor than if they've been hit by the sun for a good portion of the day. Other thing you want to keep in mind when you're picking, say, your nasturtiums or some of these other flowers, is that just naturally there's going to be bugs on them. Now you can just accept that, and I do, personally. I don't mind if there's a couple of little tiny creepy crawlies on my flowers as I'm eating them. It's just part of eating natural food. But if you want to help get them off, you need to let them rest for a little while. So what I usually do is I get a big bowl, I put a couple of wet paper towels or napkins in the bottom of it, I pick my flowers into that, and I put another wet piece of paper towel on top. You'd be surprised at how many little tiny bugs that you wouldn't have even ever noticed will just naturally crawl out of those flowers in the intervening time. You could, of course, wash them under water, but the truth is you're probably going to wreck the flower. You're probably going to damage it, so maybe don't do that. Instead, just giving it that rest period, keeping it nice and moist. That's the key. Keeping it nice and moist between those two layers of wet paper towel is going to go a long way. And flowers like nasturtiums, like pansies, are going to last for a day or two in the refrigerator as long as they're kept wet. You might choose instead that you want to dry them out. Well, there's lots of ways of drying flowers. I would encourage you to look up that information online, or maybe I'll do a presentation on that later on in the spring. But you can press and dry a lot of these and store them away for the future. It's a fun way of keeping them and then still using them at a later date. They're just not quite the same. You wouldn't want to sprinkle them on a salad if they're dry, but you could still press them into cookies. You could put them into the icing on the side of a cake, etc., etc., etc. So those are some considerations about picking and storing. Now I'm going to open back up to the chat and see if there are any questions that you all might have, or any troubleshooting. Maybe you've tried to do this in the past, but you've had some challenges. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions or anything you'd like to know a little bit more about in today's session, because obviously I want this to be useful for you. It's great to have a nice big audience like we do today. I really appreciate you all coming out. So let's see in the chat if you have any questions at all about what we're talking about here. In the meantime, I will mention that in a garden, you do need to recognize that there's always going to be pests. There's always going to be something chewing on it. If you're on Vancouver Island, I'm sorry. If you've got delicious flowers and you've got deer, they're going to find them. Maybe surround them by something less interesting. They don't like calendula much. Maybe a ring of calendula will help keep your other things a little more protected. But pests are a normal part of things. And yeah. Now, next week's presentation is going to be on dye plants. And we're going to be talking a little about selecting dye plants, some of the colors they provide, how to use them in a very, very basic way. I do hope you'll join us for that one, some of our other workshops. If you live close by, don't forget that we do in-person workshops at this time of year, mostly on cooking topics. So this weekend, we're doing workshops on, we're doing workshops on condiments. So we're going to be making pesto. We're going to be making chimichurri. We're going to be making mayonnaise, talking about the history of ketchup, making proper mayonnaise, things like that. We're also going to be doing workshops on smoking and curing, and cheese making and sourdough. Those are all in-person workshops. You've got to come here, but I hope that you will. Also, if you find this content valuable, we didn't charge you anything for it. We're not going to charge you anything for it. We're happy to share. But if you want to support us, one of the best things that you can do is spread the word about these presentations. Make sure more people even come to the next one. The other thing that you can do is consider buying a season's pass to the site. Whether you're able to visit us physically or not, that little bit of money at this time of year when there's not a lot of money coming in the doors would be hugely beneficial to us. Check out our website, all the information's on there. So as far as I see one question that Kent managed to get in about specific lavenders. That really depends on where you are. English lavender, French lavender, not the same in terms of how hardy they are. You're going to need to do a little bit more research yourself. Most lavenders are going to have that lavender aroma, some more than others. Just have fun and experiment. Anyways, thank you so much for being a part of today's live stream. Thank you for spending this time with me on a Wednesday evening. And I really, really, really look forward to seeing you guys all again next week or for any of our future workshops. So you guys take care, and we'll see you again sometime soon.